Hello, welcome to the sideboard here at Grand Prix Miami. I am Nick Miller alongside Matt Costa, Merriam. How you guys doing?
Good, thanks for having us.
All right, you two are known for playing Standard quite a bit, and I'm excited for the Standard Grand Prix, and we're going to talk about Standard here in a Grand Prix quick questions.
Okay.
We're going to start off, we'll start with Matt, and we'll rotate. What is the best deck in Standard?
I think abstractly the best deck is Abzan midrange, but I don't necessarily think it's a good choice for this weekend.
What makes it the best deck?
It just has powerful, proactive game plan, but answers to everything, and it dodges the really powerful red removal.
Okay. What about you, Ross?
I have to agree with everything Matt said. Abzan midrange is just very powerful, very flexible, and flexibility is really important in this format. So over the course of maybe 6 to 8 weeks or something like that, if you have to play one deck at every single tournament, Abzan midrange is the best choice, but for any given weekend, it's not going to be the best choice.
So I can assume that you're both playing Abzan midrange then, correct?
No, I'm not playing Abzan midrange.
All right, so let's figure out what you guys are playing. If you think Abzan's the best deck, what deck are you playing and why are you playing it this weekend?
I'm playing Sultai Control. I think it's really well positioned against the Devotion decks, which are going to be really popular,
okay.
The Abzan midrange decks, which are going to be popular, and the red-white aggro decks, which are probably not going to be as popular as last weekend, but will still exist.
Okay.
I'm playing green splash white Devotion. It's similarly powerful to the Abzan deck, but a bit more proactive, where it goes really far over the top. And the biggest issue with the Devotion decks in the past has been their control matchup, and with Master the Unseen in this version, you have a much better game against the control decks, so you fixed a major hole of the deck before.
Right. And this is the new evolution of the green Devotion decks. We've seen black and we've seen red. Now you're switching over to white for things like Banishing Light, Mastery of the Unseen?
Yep.
Okay. Is Standard solved right now?
Definitely not.
No.
All right, because we have seen many Standard formats previous to this that have not been as exciting as this one. What makes the Standard format so robust?
Well, I think that there's just no clear dominant strategy, and I mean, I guess that's sort of obvious in a non-solve format, but there's a lot of rotating options in terms of how you can build your deck, and a lot of the different decks you can tune to be good against one or two things, but not everything. So it's a lot of a guessing game as to what the metagame is going to be week in and week out.
Yeah, without a clear dominant deck where all the decks are pretty close, the edge you gain from having the right deck at the right time becomes relatively more important.
Right.
And so you see people seeking out that edge more and more, so the metagame rotates and stays fresher for longer.
Right, that's important coming from you as someone who's played a lot of the same decks. You know, when you think back, Mono Blue Devotion, you just hammered that deck home, and now you found a format here where we're kind of switching it up.
Yeah, this format's horrible. I just want to play the same deck for 12 months.
All right. Speaking of decks, what would you consider the most overrated and the most underrated decks in this format?
Most overrated, I would probably say, is Abzan aggro. I think it's just not a consistent enough deck, and it has weak spots against a couple of the big decks in the metagame right now. That said, I don't want to play it against it. I play against it myself, so that's sort of an issue.
Right.
Overrated, I would probably say Blue-White Heroic. We haven't seen as much of it on the Grand Prix circuit as we've seen on the Open circuit, but for the most part, I just don't think that deck's good, so I don't understand why people ever play it at all.
Okay.
Yeah, I forgot about Blue-White Heroic. That's just awful, awful deck. I'm on board with Ross.
All right, so we've come to a conclusion. For this Standard format, there are a lot of skills you can have in Magic and try to improve on. But for this iteration of Standard, is there a skill or a subset of skills that you think players could improve on specifically?
I think the most important skill in the Standard environment for sure is sideboarding. A lot of the decks have a really different texture in between their Game 1 and Game 2 plans. You see that evidenced a lot in the red-white and blue-white-red strategies, which shift from aggressive to more controlling, and ironically, the opposite in Abzan strategies, which board in more threats for dead removal in some of the matchups where they don't have inevitability. And I think that being able to predict how your opponents are going to sideboard and then sideboard accordingly, as opposed to sideboarding against what their Game 1 deck looks like, is phenomenally important and something that a lot of players aren't going to do right.
Yeah, that was perfect.
No, it's fine. We've seen decks, early on since the first open of the new set where Kevin Jones with the Jeskai deck, that was aggro, moves to control. We've seen Brad Nelson just recently with the Abzan deck, siding in like Fleece main lines and things like that. So,
yeah.
All right. Speaking of standard here, if you could bring back one card to be reprinted in Dragons of Tarkir to shore it up or make it a little more balanced or improve it overall, what would that card be?
I think I'm going to go with Duress.
Okay.
That's just a card that I find I've wanted to add to a lot of my decks, and I think that it's a card that would help some of the mid-range and even more aggressively slanted black decks against the control decks. And I think the trend we're going to see this weekend is that people are going to be talking about how good the control decks are.
Right.
I'm going to go with Sword of Feast and Famine.
What makes that card so good?
It's a card that lets aggressive strategies break through the wall of defensive green creatures, Caryatid, Courser, Siege Rhino, while also being very good against the control decks. And it lets you develop your board as an aggressive deck without running into the really powerful sweepers like Drown in Sorrow, Anger the Gods, things like that. So it'll help out some of the lower curve aggressive decks, being like a way for them to really go over the top of the defenses that the other decks have established.
I like it. I can see both of those cards having spots in the metagame. Lastly here, what spoiler from Dragons of Tarkir are you guys most excited about going forward?
This is sort of an innocuous one, but Ultimate Price.
Mm-hmm.
I think one of the big issues with Standard is that there just aren't very many good cards that cost 1 and 2 mana, and there also aren't any good removal spells that cost 1 and 2 mana, so a lot of the time falling behind on tempo is just a death sentence in a lot of the matchups, but also just casting only 1 spell a turn makes for a pretty boring format. So just any card that costs 1 or 2 I'm going to approve of, and Ultimate Price is the best one I've seen so far.
I am most excited by Stratus Dancer, just because that's the type of card that slots into decks that I like to play, so if it's good, then I'll have a deck that I like. Very selfish.
I like the answers. Well, thanks for sitting down with me here on the sideboard. Hopefully we get to see all of your predictions come true here at Grand Prix Miami. Stay tuned to StarCityGames.com for all the coverage this weekend.